Trapsoul, a blend of genres used by many artists like Tory Lanez and Summer Walker, but I want to focus on one artist in particular, Bryson Tiller. What made his sound so iconic is the choice of 90s samples from the legendary Jodeci to the smooth Chris Williams. In today's video, I'm going to show you the secrets into a 90s sample and flip it into a Trapsoul beat. Starting with a 110 BPM because I knew I could get a similar bounce to the 90s genre. So when listening to the in-house song that used the All Night Long sample, I noticed the main sound in that was the electric piano. So I found a roll-on synthesizer that captured that 90s sound, and this was the JV 1080, and I just layered that with a subtle piano in the background. So for the chords, I wanted to give it that nice slow jam vibe. So I used an E minor ninth, going into a B minor ninth, back into an E minor ninth. Then I built tension with a D major ninth. Then you use an E minor seventh, and I dropped the B and then just transposed the G up one octave. So for the electric piano, I just added this cassette just to give that nice old school grip. And for the piano, I used these Rode chambers that sort of boxed the piano in and didn't make it too harsh. So next is the drums. The Roland TR-808 drum machine was used a lot in the 90s, especially for like Jodeci. So I obviously want to capture that similar sound. So as you can see here, I've panned many sounds from left to right just so there's freeing up the space. And what was used a lot in the 90s was a reverb on their sound. So I had a slight dense reverb on the kick, then another dense reverb on the snare, but it made it a little bit more wider. But I wanted to give them drums that old school vibe. So I run the drums through this preamp just to boost the signals. Then I use this tape saturation to give it that old school vibe. Then I use this exciter to bound the frequencies and make the frequencies in certain pockets come to life. In the 90s and even today, they still use the Fender P-Bass. So I found a sound in the Korg Triton, which was another synthesizer used, and this matched the bass in Swing My Way, which was using the Exchange sample. So a lot of the time in the 90s I used to run the bass through an Ampeg B15. So this amp really gives the bass a nice warmth to it, and as you can see here, I just boosted the treble a little bit so to give it more character, and just brought the bass down a little bit because it was just too overpowering. Moving on to the string sections that I added. So for the atmosphere, I use this M1 Triton again, which is a synthesizer that was used a lot, and then for the stabbing, I use this SRX strings by Roland's, and these strings are similar to the one in All I See by Chris Williams, which is sampled in the Still Yours. So for the atmosphere strings, I use this chorus. It just gives it a little bit of a thickness to it. And then as I want it to be an atmosphere, I run it through this S1 imager, which makes it more wide. Then next I added these bells. With this one, I used the S1 imager to pan to the right, so it's just creating space. Then we had the second bell that had that nice sparkling effect. And this sound was using the falling around by changing faces, which was in the outro always. And all I did with this was add this ping pong delay just so it's filling in the sample a little bit more. Moving on to the lead sounds that I stacked together. So when listening to the 90s samples that Bryson Tiller used, you could notice there's a lot of top line guitars. And I used this Stratosphere guitar that was commonly used. And I just added a little bit of dust and tape to it in this VST just to give it that nice old school vibe. So I ran it through this amp to just give it a little bit more brightness. And just like the 90s, I added a chorus and flanger just to give it that nice tone. Then I used this vibrato just give that guitar that nice wobbling effect that was always used in the 90s, sort of giving it like a pitch bend effect. The next was the lead that I stacked on top of the guitar, and it's a very important element. As you can see at the bottom here, there's a pitch modulation wheel that was used a lot in the 90s. So I set up an automation clip so when the lead was playing, this modulation wheel was moving up, giving it a nice old school pitch bend. So I did that by just recording and moving this modulation wheel. And if you take a look at FL Studio, you can see that automation clip working, so it's just rising and giving it that wobble effect. So with this lead, I just drowned it in the spring reverb, bringing me onto the vocals that I added. Obviously, I can't sing very well compared to a 90s R&B artist, so I just layer stacked some slow vocals, one being a normal tone of my voice and one being in a higher tone of my voice. I had it all, never known. Gave you it all, blinded by the So for the normal pitches, I wanted to just tone down the harshness of my voice, so I used a wider reverb. Then for the higher tone, I used this ambient reverb that boxed it in. Then for a normal tone, I panned it slightly to the right. Then for the higher tone, I panned it slightly to the left. And then comparing the EQs, I just EQ'd them differently. Then I wanted to add like a nice background vocal that really gave it atmosphere. So I didn't like the tone of my voice in this, so I used a little alter boy to just bring it down so it's a lower tone. Then I used this intensity reverb that really drowned it out, so it's just more of a background element. Then obviously I needed to compress these vocals so there was more tighter in the volume. With all these vocals in general, I put it through this master tape to give that 90s vibe. Then I used this ozone imager where I got the frequency bands and just made them a little bit more stereo. And this is important because it gives certain frequencies a little bit more character. So let's take a listen to the sample all together. So next, let me show you how to flip it into that Trapsoul beat. So the first thing I did was lower it to 76 BPM to give it that tiller bounce. And I had to time stretch it so it's a lot faster, so it sounds like this. So I chopped the sample up and reversed it, which was used a lot in the Anniversary project. Noticed a lot with tiller samples, it had a lot of flanger on, so I put a bit of flanger on. And then I noticed a low pass filter was used that just gives that a nice muffling sound. So obviously in a tiller beat, you want a bass. So the drums I'm using in this video is the Ed Talante's Heroes bundle, which is on Rip speakers. Make sure to check my affiliate link down below. This will give you 500 Rip coins, which is equivalent to $5. And my sample pack is dropping on their website in August, so check that out. So the first thing I did was add these heavy trap snares. Common trap hi-hats, I had a little bit of rolls on the end. Bassy, hard-hitting kick, creating a bounce. Then I use this open hat like laser sound. And I use this stop-start bass that just sort of bounces off the snare. So together this is how the whole Trapsoul beat sound. So yeah, that is the whole beat all together. Hopefully you learned something from this video. Drop a like down below and a comment on what you want to see next. I'll see you in the next one.